Chris. How did you stumble upon this particular niche, the art of recognition, employee appreciation? I don't know a lot of experts in this field. You have become very recognizable, successful, but have you always known that this is where you want to get into? What were your careers
No,
before?
to not go into my full origin story, because it's a long story, but I think that the simplest version of it is that my background was conflict resolution. So I was facilitating dialogues between Israelis and Palestinians, Indians, Pakistanis, Greek and Turkish Cypriots. And so I'd be the one of, like I said, as you're creating an experience, on here, is that I had been running these, cross-border dialogue programs for years. And so when I was doing these, but you can't earn money in conflict resolution, so you always have to do something else. You can earn money in conflict and weapons and stuff like that, but not on the track 2. It's called track 2 diplomacy. Track 1 diplomacy is government to government. Track 2 is civilian to civilian. And I may not be saying that 100% right, or civil,
Wow.
civil society. And so I was running these programs. I've been doing it for years. And one of my programs that was funded through the State Department, me and my 2 coworkers had a really successful program, but by the end of the program, we had a huge falling out. We could barely be in the room together, and we're conflict resolution specialists. And after a year of passive aggressive fighting, not being able to actually work out the dynamic, it was a 15-minute recognition activity that transformed the relationship. It was one question that we asked, which is a process that I call reflective recognition now. But it was how that one recognition activity transformed our whole relationship, or began to transform our relationship, is what's put me on this journey to explore the role of recognition in our relationships. And then after that, I was living in Boston, and I was working at Children's Hospital Boston as a job coach, supporting people to go back to school. And that's how I earned a living, because, like I said, you don't make any money in conflict resolution. And so when I was doing that, I was interviewing one person a day on the subway to and from work. And so I did over 400 plus interviews. And what came out of that was this absolutely insane relationship to giving and receiving recognition at work. And many of those concepts and some of the insights and lessons that I learned, I've published in articles in HBR and in Forbes, and I'm working on a book in the next couple of years around this subject, because our ability to give is largely contingent on our ability to receive. And our ability to receive recognition is based in our past experience with it. And so, whether somebody manipulated us with recognition, whether they, recognized us right before they asked for something, or sandwich feedback between 2 criticisms, what I spend most of my time doing is unpacking the misunderstandings and misuse of recognition, so that we can update our relationship to it, to the modern world, to our modern life, and as an adult, so we can use this powerful tool that helps us build and maintain relationships every single day, and think about how we can do that in the workplace. And that's what I spend most of my time do, is training people to update how they think of recognition, and then update the relationship so they can first receive, and then after being better at receiving, getting better at giving it in a more authentic way.
My goodness. There is so much to unpack there. I'm hearing this for the first time. Conducted 400 interviews. So literally this episode on Face World is 322 for Chris. And I've been doing this since 2014. And yet you conducted over 400 interviews, if I heard you correctly, on the train to and back from work. Did you talk to random people, like strangers on the train?
It was the most awkward and uncomfortable thing that I've ever done. And so my rule was, and I shouldn't have said on my way to work. I didn't interview people in the morning. I interviewed them in the afternoon. And whoever I sat down next to on the train, no matter what they were doing, what was going on, I had to interrupt them and interview them. And in 400 people that I went up to, I had 2 people say no.
Oh, wow.
And other than that, I had some extraordinary conversations. I interviewed Harvard professors, doctors, nurses, parking lot attendants, Delta ground crew members. Being on the subway in a major US city just opened me up to a whole world. It was a very interesting lab. And the stories that came out just kept on exposing just another dynamic and another dynamic of the role of our expression of and receiving of recognition is what came out in those conversations. And it was absolutely fascinating.
Wow. This is fantastic. I mean, what are some of the stories that you still remember? I was just wondering, because a lot of people, when I interview them, they're like, wow, I haven't had this opportunity my whole life to actually share my story from like beginning to end. I mean, it's not the end yet. I love talking to like, I don't want to call them ordinary people, but everyday people, as opposed to people who are being interviewed all the time. They're like, I'm so sick of telling my story. So what are some of the
Well, I mean, so it was the interviews often were quick because someone had to get off at the next stop. And
yeah.
so some interviews would be 2 minutes long, and other
Mhm.
times I had one woman who was administrative assistant for somebody who got off the train and wouldn't let go of my hand for like 10 minutes because she wanted to keep on talking. Because I
Oh.
realized I was one of the first people to listen and ask her, what's the best acknowledgement from a boss? And what most people told me was not what made a great acknowledgement, but what was missing at work, that they
Mhm.
didn't feel valued, that they didn't feel like anyone recognized them, that why is somebody recognizing them for just doing their job?
Mhm.
And what it really exposed is our inability or our lack of training, because many times we just assume that people know how to recognize others, that
Mhm.
people, this is a given skill that we've all been born with to be polite. And being effective at recognizing and expressing our appreciation, we wouldn't, if we were naturally good at it, there would
Mhm.
be like 4 aisles of gift cards in every like superstore or grocery store for birthdays and things like that, helping
That's
us say what we don't know how to say. So instead of standing on the aisle there, figuring out which card represents what we want to say, if we actually pause and knew how to do it, we'd know how to express it without having to have a card that says it for us, right?
Ooh,
And so
yeah.
that's why, but we haven't been trained. And I posted a survey on LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, about have you ever received training in how to effectively recognize people? And I was just curious. And 400 people responded. It's a 400 thing right now. I don't know,
Mm.
like 400 interviews, 400 people fill it out. 400 people answered the survey,
Yeah.
and 70% had little or no training ever in how to effectively recognize people at work.
Mhm.
And the answers, I think, was yes, kind of, or never. And the kind of was like it was one slide as part of another presentation. And the people who had, out of the people that had, about 30% of those people were people who had attended my workshops in the past I was connected to on LinkedIn. And so
Oh, wow.
people don't often train people in this because we
Mhm.
assume it's a given skill, where
Mhm.
it's something like giving feedback, which
Mm.
praising is giving feedback, right? Giving feedback or project management, it's a skill that we have to develop. And we just need to invest time and resources to do it. And I always encourage, and this is self-serving, of course, but is instead of investing, you know, however much money in your point system, give your leaders the tools to have the day-to-day conversations that make the biggest impact. Because it's not about saying the right thing and saying it in this deep and meaningful way. Many times the most powerful thing we can do is ask the person what they want to be acknowledged for. Right.
Mm.
A
Mhm.
mentor of mine, Mark Goldstein, who I actually just saw this morning, has one of my favorite lines ever. And it's less important what we say to others. It's less
Mhm.
important what we say to others than what we empower others to say to us. And
Mm.
that right
Mhm.
there is, one of the biggest gifts we give people by just asking them.